Berlin Wall. There's pieces of it everywhere now, even in Montreal. And you'll see pieces of it all over the media these days. And usually you'll see this side, the western side, the surface on which we like to project all kinds of fantasies. I prefer the other side. This is the wall as East Germans saw it, generally a blank slate, except for this graffiti here. The wall, for East Germans, was a condition of their existence. They internalized it. They built their lives around it. But today, when we look back at the Berlin Wall, people make up all kinds of stories. In this short video, I'd like to talk about the 20th anniversary of the fall of the wall as an occasion where false memory syndrome has run rampant. It seems that the 20th anniversary of the fall of the wall has gotten a lot more media attention than the 10th anniversary. And I think it's because 20 years is long enough that people have started to forget actually what happened. And so what's at stake now when we talk about the 20th anniversary of the fall of the wall is what really happened. And what's at stake behind that is, of course, a power question. It's always interesting to go and look at Wikipedia, for example. I always like to compare German, French, and English pages. So if you go to the Berlin Wall in Wikipedia, and you look at it in English, it's interesting to see that the fall of the wall is preceded by a little blurb on Ronald Reagan's speech of June 1987, where he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And you can be sure that that sentence is going to come over and over again in American reporting on the fall of the wall, for example. But when you go to the German page, what's fascinating there is you find a new paragraph has been inserted into the history of the wall just in the last few weeks, where the author claims that West German authorities were aware of the impending collapse of the wall and that they knew all along. This gives us a whole different view of what was going on at the time. When it comes to big events like the fall of the Berlin Wall, everybody, of course, would like to take credit. The American right, the West German government, and of course various actors of the day. Now, if we go back to November 9th, we all know now that it was pretty much of an accident. Günter Schabowski came out that evening to a press conference and announced a reform of the travel laws and announced that there would no longer be visas required to go visit the West. And a journalist asked, "And when is this effective?" And he said, "Immediately." That was improvised. And much of the rest of the evening was improvised as well. Thousands of people streamed to the border checkpoints. But nobody did anything. They just stood there. The border guards didn't know what to do either. They tried to get the crowds to leave. They called their superiors, but nobody knew what was going on. Finally, the border guards, in sort of an act of not knowing what to do, simply opened the gates and the people streamed across. The rest was history. This, of course, was an inevitable result of the East German regime's efforts to save face, to backtrack, to fight a rearguard action, to gain control of events, ever since a much more momentous event, which was the 9th of October in Leipzig. In fact, celebrating the 9th of November is a bit of an error. It's really just the denouement of what started on October 9th in Leipzig. That day, as on previous Mondays, there was a peace prayer at the Nikolai Church. The authorities in Leipzig, or on the level of the GDR as a whole, decided to put an end not only to those peace prayers, but to the demonstrations that had followed them in the streets of Leipzig around the Nikolai Church. And so they let it be known, and they effectively did, organize tens of thousands of policemen, troops, militia members to put down the demonstration. They also let it be known that the hospitals would have extra blood reserves, and they also brought in a supply of body bags. What happened on the night of October 9th? Nothing. Nothing at all happened, except that 70,000 people showed up spontaneously and braved the menace of a Chinese solution. It had been just months since Tiananmen, and everybody knew the regime intended to put down the protests. But too many people came, despite their fear. Now, this might have been a heroic event, but again, who can claim credit for the 9th of October? It wasn't really the dissidents who had organized the peace prayers. It wasn't the party officials who decided not to shoot. It was a multiplicity of actors, an infinity of people who took to the streets, decided on their own not only to go out and protest, but also who decided not to throw a rock, who decided not to shoot, not to hurl an insult. And in fact, this very peaceful event, just like the events of the 9th of November, was possible because nobody in particular, but everybody in general, participated in these events. They participated by acting or by not acting, by not violently trying to overthrow the government, nor taking up arms to defend the regime, because there were still many people who believed in the regime and its potential for reform. And so it was from this convergence of infinite numbers of actors, well, not quite infinite, but thousands of people, who all, for various reasons, did what they did or didn't do what they didn't do, that the events of the 9th of October could transpire and the events of the 9th of November could transpire. Now, I just want to go back to the 9th of October, because it too, like the 9th of November, has been the subject of what I call false memory syndrome. In fact, I was just recently in Leipzig for the 20th anniversary of the 9th of October, and I participated in a huge event designed to commemorate the 9th of October. And families were invited to bring their children and to bring candles and to march around the ring road of central Leipzig. And the media then reported afterwards, just like 20 years ago, men, women, and children marched around the streets of Leipzig with candles in their hands and remembered the peaceful revolution. Now this, of course, is complete nonsense. People on the 9th of October 1989 were scared. Those people were not families, women and children. It was mostly men, scared men, who sent their wives and children home, and who certainly were not carrying candles. They were carrying fear in their hearts. But that event is now being turned into a tourist event. The city organized a sound and light show that had nothing to do with the events of 1989. We'll probably have lots of sound and light shows on November 9th. God only knows what they'll project onto the wall. It won't be graffiti, it'll probably be, well, on the space where the wall used to be. Who knows what they'll have, holograms or whatnot. Doesn't really matter. The thing to remember coming up to the 9th of November and after the 9th of November is that history is not one of heroism. History is not one of great men. History is the action of everyone. So as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the fall of the wall, let's remember, there's not just two sides to a wall, there's not just two sides to a story. I like this surface of the wall here, because it reminds us that the 9th of November was a liminal moment, but also a moment in history whose meaning is multiple, and whose multiplicity of meaning we must preserve.